will set out from constituencies that have never returned a Conservative MP for 100 years. And yes, they will have an overwhelming mandate from this election to get Brexit done, and we will honour that mandate by January the 31st. And so in this moment of national resolution, I want to speak directly to those who made it possible and to...
Notice what he said. To constituencies that have never voted Conservative or never voted Tory. And he's right. Some of these were mining constituencies that Margaret Thatcher absolutely crushed, ended up voting Conservative. Why? They might not have liked Corbyn, but also these were people who voted Brexit. My point is, Corbyn was hobbled by his own party, whether intentional or not. And in being hobbled by his own party, he had to go out and try to make a pitch for something other than Brexit, despite the fact that he had to know that this election was going to be about Brexit. It's an issue of weakness. But it's also an issue that the left conned themselves into believing that the NHS was going to be an overriding issue in this election, which I got to be honest, I have no idea why they thought that. The polls might have showed it a little bit tightening, but for the most part, the Labour Conservative Party was always in the lead. Even when Boris Johnson was losing all of those votes, he still remained in the lead. It was clear that the public saw him trying to get Brexit done and gave him approval of that. He wanted an election because he knew he could break the back of Labour. And Labour taking this wishy-washy position on Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn being just assaulted, savaged, outside by the media, but also inside of Parliament, sometimes by members of his own party, but definitely by Boris himself. It's too much. It was too much. Lefties need to learn something from this. And the thing that you need to learn from this is compromising is not always a positive attribute, especially if your compromises are the thing that absolutely ends up undermining your attempt at gaining power. Even if those are people who say they're part of your own party, it doesn't necessarily mean that they support and back your interests. And from Corbyn's standpoint, I made the argument that Corbyn needed to wipe the table. That he should have said, all right, now that Brexit is off the table, or no deal Brexit is off the table, I'm going to give you our idea of Brexit. Now, the reason I made that argument is because it seemed like it was too much of an albatross to run in a wishy-washy policy. And I think ultimately that might have been a better choice. I mean, if you're going to lose because people, Remainers, were going to take you out, or if you're going to lose in an election, I think the latter might have been better. Losing an election allows you and what you represent to be utterly and entirely demonized as being failed. And that's what's taken place, especially when they're hitting the left. This is Corbyn's response after the loss. And I feel for the guy in part I don't. I mean, part of me feels for the guy because I think he's a decent human being. But I said before, Ned Stark's got his head chopped off. I mean, in situations like this, he would have been better off deselecting those members of the party that were still Blairites and that weren't in his best interests, as opposed to allowing those people to fester around him. He were better off backing people who were actually in support of him. Galloway, Williamson, and being aggressive and pushing back on these anti-Semitic claims as opposed to accepting the narrative of events that was being presented before him. His policies weren't horrific. If anything, his policies, if you're talking about some other nations, well, those are just kind of typical policies of, let's say, like Scandinavian nation of sorts. So it wasn't that these things were kind of outright radical. They might have been to the left in terms of British politics. But I make the point that the issue wasn't policy. If this was a race, let's say Brexit was settled and they were just Bojo versus Corbyn, well, that's a different race. That's not Corbyn having to distance himself from the actual issue of the election and talk about something else. The catch here is concerns about the NHS are real. U.S. companies are salivating at getting their hands on the NHS and increasing the price of drugs and services and so forth. That's real. By the same token, that's not the point of the election. Let's hear Corbyn.
That is Obviously very sad at the result we've achieved, and very sad at those colleagues that lost their seats in the election, and very sad for many people in this country who will now have a government that is continuing policies of austerity, and many of the poorest communities, I think, will suffer very badly from the economic strategy that I suspect the Prime Minister will take forward. But also, I have pride in our manifesto that we put forward, and all the policies we put forward, which actually had huge public support on issues of universal credit, the green industrial revolution, and investment for the future. But this election was taken over, ultimately, by Brexit, and we as a party represent people who both voted Remain and Leave, and my whole strategy was to reach out beyond the Brexit divide to try and bring people together, because ultimately the country has to come together.
Now, the question comes up, well, how was he able to reach beyond the divide in 2017? If you remember, in 2017, Labour actually did quite well and pushed back Theresa May. Now, in one case, Theresa May was a bad campaigner, so fair enough. But in another case, the big difference, Labour didn't abandon the referendum. They had their idea of Brexit. It was baby soft with a bit of powder on it, but at the very least, it was Brexit. It was their position on Brexit. In this case, they abdicated that position and had to run after abdicating the position where the leader of the opposition, if become prime minister, would not even take a position on his own Brexit bill. That's an untenable position. Let's keep listening.
So what went wrong?
Well, those in Leave areas, in some numbers, voted for Brexit or Conservative candidates, which meant that we lost a number of seats and we didn't make the gains that I'd hoped we could have done, particularly in the Midlands and Yorkshire and the North.
You talked about last night a period of reflection before you stand down. You wouldn't lead the party into another general election. When are you planning on standing down?
Well, the National Executive will have to meet, of course.
God, that's brutal. God, that hurts, that hurts, that hurts. Look, I call this, but just because I call this doesn't necessarily mean I'm happy about this. But we need to be very clear, especially from the standpoint of the left. There are certain lessons to take from this. I've said maybe a month or two ago that they're going to call Sanders anti-Semitic. They're going to call him a self-hating Jew, all of this stuff. And because this worked on Corbyn, they immediately tried to recycle this over to the United States to see if it could draw blood. I got to be honest, I don't think this draws blood in the United States. It's a different situation regarding Sanders, not to mention his family died in the Holocaust. So it's different. It doesn't mean they won't try. These things should not be taken lightly, nor should you accept the narratives that they put forth. Those things need to be pushed back on, viciously so. Because the moment that you accept the narrative, at that point, you're living in their world in regards to the criticism, the conversation that you are having. How often have you beat your wife? What do you mean, beat my wife? I mean, we may have some people in our party who beat our wives, but I don't think that's a bit... And at that point now, it's, why do you tolerate people beating your wives in their party? You can't accept it if it's not true. The secondary point, especially from the standpoint of the left in the United States, don't accept this notion that what took place there is synonymous with here. It's not. At least it's not a one-to-one. It's fair to say that, yeah, what's his name is a lefty, Jeremy Corbyn. And Jeremy Corbyn failed in regards to another populist right-wing candidate. But that's not necessarily the same thing that applies to here. Like I said, we don't have a queen, nor are we trying to separate from any particular process other than a basic general election. And we are in the context of a primary, and in the context of that primary, we're trying to get somebody who's a lefty to exceed the primary and to try to go against Trump. We don't have an overriding issue of Brexit. Our guy can make the argument that the other guy failed, and it is widely believed that in 2016, if Sanders would have ran that race, Sanders would have won. I'm willing to put my guy up against their guy. And fact of the matter is, I've often said that the political parties are synonymous with one another from the standpoint of the United States and the UK. So during the Thatcher years, you had Reagan in office, Reagan, Thatcher. You had Clinton and Blair. You had Bush and Blair, which was a breaking of the trend. But both of these guys are neo-libs, and both of these guys look at the world in some degree of the same way. So I don't know if you can entirely say you broke the trend. But you end up now with Trump, or you had Obama and Cameron, and now you're going to end up with Trump and Bojo. Is there that much of a difference, though, between Trump and Bojo and then getting a Sanders and Bojo? I mean, both of these guys are populist candidates. Both of these guys are, for the most part, considered to be populist. Let's say it that way. I guess my point is, there are times where this goes out of kilter, meaning a Blair versus a Bush. And I just mean out of kilter from the standpoint of the party system. I don't see these things as being synonymous with one another. I see these things as having dramatically different circumstances in which these guys are running in the race. Corbyn, at no point, wanted to run in this race against Bojo. And you can look at it when this came up. He was dragged, kicking and screaming to the woodshed in this race. They're not synonymous. Listen to this. This is one of the Blairites who don't like Corbyn, who don't like anything of the Corbynites. Listen to this shift in tone. This shift in tone. She starts off, Jess Phillips, giddy, laughing, because again, I make the point. And look, let's be fair. When Clinton lost to Trump, part of me giggled. Part of me giggled. Another part of me was horrified. But it was this weird thing of happy to see her lose, but by the same token, being terrified that he won, and both of those things sitting uneasily beside one another. Well, I've argued that throwaway Democrats, or in this case Blairites, would prefer Bojo or Trump over Sanders or Corbyn. Look at this. You're going to love this.
Unfold. Good evening, Jess. How are you feeling as these results unfold?
She's so happy. She's so happy. She's so happy. Now, if I'm not mistaken, she won her seat. So fair enough. Fair enough. But look at how this happiness, almost on a dime, becomes abject, complete, utter misery.
Can you hear me, Jess Phillips? It's Richmond. Guru Murphy here.
I can hear you, sorry.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, straight face. Actually, you don't have to have a straight face on this show.
He's calling her on it, by the way. He's calling her on it. She's like laughing and she's like, all right. And he's like, straight face. Yeah, straight face. You don't have to have a straight face. Look, you're happy. You're giddy. You're giddy. So fair enough. But this is supposed to be the most miserable day of Labor's life going back to 1935. And you seem to be pretty happy and giddy about it. I suppose if I won my seat, I would be happy also. But the speed at which she goes from, I am on the moon, to, I am at the utter depths of terror and I'm going to jump off of a cliff. And pivot to, a lot of people have been saying I should run for leader. This is amazing. I love this.
What are you thinking?
Are you talking to me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, that wasn't clear. Sorry. I'm really tired. What I'm thinking is, it's just totally devastating, isn't it? It's totally devastating that all the people that I see every day, they're going to have nowhere to turn. And I mean, I should say that thing where we all pretend that we're going to wait and see if the results are better than we thought, but it feels like a kick in the stomach. I can't hear you, so.
I'm just waiting, actually, for your thoughts. I mean, I'm not diving in. I mean, look, well, you look emotional and upset, and that's understandable.
She didn't look emotional and upset a moment ago. I mean, this is in all of what, 30 seconds? When she was on the moon. And then it's like, this is horrendous. He's like, you seem pretty emotional. I am. It hurts so bad. It hurts so bad. Yes, I'm a cynical SOB on this stuff. Do I believe that she wanted Labour to lose to this degree? I don't know. I have no idea. Do I believe she considers this an opportunity to take leadership? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Absolutely. 1,000%. I do. And does that potentially lead into her joy in this moment? She could denigrate Corbyn and everything that is Corbynism while simultaneously claiming that people have been talking her up for leadership. Let's hear.
Can you say that again, sorry?
Jess, it's just that you look very emotional, and we know you. We know you're a normal, sane person, so it's very
Yeah, I am very emotional.
Yeah.
I am very emotional, but not just for me or for the Labour Party, or I'm emotional for the people the Labour Party was invented to help. I am emotional that this has happened across the parts of the country that for lots of us we have felt like they were never being listened to. You know, what is not to be emotional about? On the way home from literally seconds after I heard the exit poll, I had to stop my car because there was a woman fleeing in the street, and I can help one person on an individual basis and I can get them to safety. But what am I?
Just so we're clear, she was fleeing in the streets. What was she fleeing? What was she fleeing? Was there Godzilla chasing her? Was there something that was running behind her trying to get her and gobble her up? What was she fleeing? I mean, think about what this looks like. She's driving in her car, she's listening to the results, and there's a woman just, I suppose, crying and flipping out. And for whatever reason, this woman is fleeing something. It's this weird esoteric feeling that, oh my God, Bojo got elected. He has a stunning majority. The public chose overwhelmingly to decide on get Brexit done. And we have been trying to frustrate getting Brexit done. And they punished us severely for it. And this all-consuming air of Bojo was just behind her. She was just... And she gets out of her car. And she goes running behind the woman. And, like, what is she... Do we believe this? Like, is this believed? Is this believed? Is this taken to be true? A woman was fleeing? A woman was fleeing? What was she fleeing? And did you get out and were you running at top speed to catch this woman that was fleeing? This is ludicrous.
I meant to do structurally. There is no structural solution to the problems that people face where I live. And that is devastating. I can't pretend otherwise.
Would you ever consider leading the Labour Party yourself?
This is the inevitable question. This is the inevitable question that everybody will ask me all night. And the truth of the matter is I'd be lying if I said that millions of people hadn't asked me if I wanted to be the leader of the Labour Party. At the moment, I think that the Labour Party... We've lost 4 elections with 3 really different leaders. And I think it is more than just a personality game, and I know that people like me because I have a personality. And
I love how it's always someone else asks me. I can't get credibility in and of myself. It's this faceless, nameless crowd that is chomping at the bit to get me in office, and I, as a statesman, tell them no. She was licking her lips at Corbyn losing this election. She was licking her lips. I strongly suspect that is true.